Hello, I'm going to introduce our new workflows that use DKUI, which is a new user interface that allows us, as you can see, to work on a Mac. So this just launched here on my Mac, and I can make this full screen, and then I can go to over here and launch Grasshopper. And we are testing these out, and we'd love your feedback. So that's why I'm going to show you. But largely, these are going to work just like our, um, and my Grasshopper's on the other screen here, by the way. So I just dragged this Grasshopper script into Grasshopper. This is something you have to do in Rhino for Mac. You can't just drag the Grasshopper straight into Rhino, unfortunately. It doesn't know what to do. Um, And what we end up with is this cool new window here. You can see it's very clear that it's the planting workflow. So um, let me move this here to that. And then you can see, let me just see if I can move this. Hopefully this doesn't get in our way, this zoom window. But we have the ability to, you know, first of all, we can see that our plants have updated. We have the ability here to change a lot of different parameters. But the nice thing is that the user interface is very snappy and allows us to see kind of everything at once. So I can collapse the whole thing, and then I have information about our usage disclaimer, workflow instructions, and everything is nicely formatted. We have the site information, so you can pick what your site size is and where it's located, which we hope to expand on this idea. And then we have our plants, so you can pick your data source. In this case, I'm using the ERA plant data, but I could go and pick a new CSV file. So here's a new kind of modified version of the ERA that I made that just has some spacing placed in it. Where did I put it? CSV. There it is, the edit. So I can pick this different CSV file, and you'll see that now our planting has more of like a clustering going on, which is really nice. And that's all kind of built in. And you can go and change those values as well. For the collection management, we can change the number of species. So I can take this up to, let's not go crazy. Well, maybe we'll do 30 species. And it will update the number of species that we have pretty quickly. We can also manage our plant selection, which is pretty great. So we can say, okay, these are the plants that we have. These are the plants that are available according to different filters that we've given it. And we can always reload them with a new set of filters. But over here, we can do like add a plant here and then go over here and say, oh, yes, but I don't want this plant or that plant, right? And I can kind of say, okay, this is my plant list. And then I can confirm that. Now that I have my list, um, it's going to update this just a little bit. And you can see that with the new land kit that a lot of the placement of those are similar with some changes to new species we've added. Once you've managed the plant selection, that quantity value goes away. We can always randomize and reset our selection. We can also filter plants by color. So a lot of the ERA plants do not have a color associated. We are just basically filtering those out. We can filter by state. We can filter by plant type. And then once we have a plant list that we like, we can save those as a .land file. We can also load a .land file. So I can go here and say load a .land file, and it already has a, a land file that we've, saved in this our workflow. But I could go and pick another land file if I wanted to. I can also do an AI prompt. So this takes in a few extra seconds because it's really running a an AI prompt and asking for a list of plants, and it's dynamically building those plants. And so I've said I want edible plants that have white or purple flowers that could do well in sun, shade, or wet, moist, or dry soil. Give me a variety of plants that will fill this range of niches. So then I can go over here and also see that my AI plants are they're named and they have properties, but they are also labeled with AI, just so that we know that we're not. And some of these weird things that are happening are based off of the um, fact that we are um, still perfecting some of the ways that this workflow works. So, so that's that. And then we can go and look at our plant list at any point. So it shows us here, but maybe all the plants that we have in the list are not being placed. So that could be a thing that we could sort of cross-reference. Um, these are being constrained by environmental conditions. So we're constraining based on sun exposure, soil moisture. One thing that's not working on a Mac for some bizarre reason is the flower color, and we're gonna investigate that. But all these other things work except for flower color. You can also use pollinator values. So basically, you're drawing shapes on these sublayers. So soil moisture, for example, we're drawing, dry areas on a dry layer. And so under soil moisture. I can do dry, moist, wet. And as long as those values are present in the plant database, we can place based on those rules. So the same is true for sun exposure. It's just it doesn't need a set of layers. It's actually using the trees and the buildings and things like that. But we can also add custom constraints now. We could do this in earlier versions of the plant workflow, but now you can add four different layers. So you can, draw. You just need to make this input name the same as as a layer. And then the sub layers will be the values you want to constrain to. So, um, you know, in the case of soil moisture, we have dry and moist. So, this input name might be something else. Pollinator value works in a similar way. But I typically maybe just keep those off while you're exploring. Um, and then we have our different settings. Be sure to set the location in the project site info up above, but you can set your start and end month here. You can set your color tolerance for color settings. You can set and the color will work on a PC, by the way. Soil moisture just explains a little bit about how that works. And then the preview, we can just pick which thing we're previewing here. So it's only going to show you the options for things that are available. So sun exposure, um, flower color, soil, you can just kind of see it, flower color there, purple and yellow. But it's not working, unfortunately. Soil moisture, so we just have sort of dry areas here. And then we also have a few preview styles if you've noticed. So we can do a grid, um, a mesh, which is a little bit more familiar to a lot of people who have used the workflows in the past, as well as a point cloud. So if you're trying to sort of do something minimal, point cloud's kind of nice. You can kind of see things and it's not obtrusive. Um, and then you can always bake this analysis layer as well. And there's also a nice transparency to that as well. The neat thing about these sliders is they don't start processing until I let go, right? That's something that's really nice. But they're nice and snappy. And then all of our you know, UI hover our functions kind of are clear with the same color. And so there's been a lot of nice things about this new workflow as well. Of these new workflows. We have the ability to change the patterning of how we're laying out the plants. So right now I'm using a pattern that's a hex grid. I can change that grid to a set of shifted rows. Um, and I could change that width of that row to, something bigger, just so you can see clearly what I'm doing. In case you're growing crops or something like that, maybe this is a food forest and you need to be able to walk down the rows. Um, so we can change that. Um, we can change the number of steps. So if we're doing a shifted row or a running bond pattern, essentially we can do, uh, we can shift that to 2, and then we'll see when we zoom in that there's kind of just a subtle step between these. If you look at that row, it's getting less. And then we can also change the rotation to say 45. Now I'm not able to get to 45 here with the slider, but I can double click on the name, and that will give me the ability to dial something in really quickly. So on any of the sliders, you can click on the name and it will give you the ability to change that. Go back to hex, maybe also go back to CSV, and it's reloading a list of plants now. There we go. Look at that. Oof. Um, we can also pack plants. So whether you're in the pattern mode or in the organic, let's do organic here for a second. Organic's going to fill differently than the packing or the pattern. So this is a little bit more like these clusters. You can see that this list that I have is pretty generic in terms of the cluster values. But we can make this density a little bit greater so that these are filled in a little bit more tightly. And then we can pack these plants and they will kind of fill in. Oops, what happened there? That's undesirable. I'm not totally sure what's happening there. Perhaps if I have a denser, I don't think density is going to help this. Something funny is happening there. Yeah, something definitely is fishy going on there. Um, so I don't know if the pack plants is acting funny because of the Mac or what, but we'll have to investigate that. Um, yeah, and then we'll go to pattern. You can also pack plants if you're doing a patterned placement as well. So I can say, pack, and it does work there with the pattern. So actually, pattern is more persistent, and is a great way. The other neat thing here you can see is that it removes um, like it removed plants that were too close, things like that. Um, Now, if we go down to output, there's just a few tiny last things here. We can change the style. So right now we're doing modern, but we can do branching. It's a different style of block. In this branching block, it's a little flamboyant with its radius. And then we have lockup, um, which is a little bit more symbolic. And then glyphs, which are lightly religious or kind of, iconic in that way. And then we can also do 3D massing. And all of these get placed in 3D whenever they are placed. So whether it's a 3D plant doing the massing or the plant shape, or whether it's, and these trees are actually just manually placed trees in this case, which are creating shade. Um, and then we have the ability to, yeah, go back to 2D. And even in 2D, all of these plants are placed according to their elevation. So that's helpful if you're trying to understand multiple things at once in your later in your CAD file or something. You have the option to overwrite your baked plants and to also auto bake our plant schedules. So right now, every time I update this, it's baking the bloom calendar and the plant schedule. Yeah, so that's the planting workflow, which is looking very nice. And then there's the paving workflow, which I'm going to open the feet. Full screen, and I'll drag the in Rhino 8 on a Mac. The neat thing is that Grasshopper stays open, so I don't have to open it for every single app. So I didn't have to launch Grasshopper. I was just able to drag that file in to Grasshopper. It's on my other screen, so you're not seeing it. But the neat thing is we don't have to look at Grasshopper for these workflows. Um, let me minimize this a little bit. So there we go. I can pull this over here. The other neat thing about the workflow is that I can, oops, I can in on a Mac, I can dock it. I can also do a similar thing on a PC where I have a full screen mode and I dock you know, the panel to the side here. This really lovely header, I don't know if you guys can see that with the zoom or not, but um, the thing below that is the ability to load your settings from like ones you previously saved in this Rhino file. So load and save work based on the Rhino file. So if somebody's sort of save it, if I say save, it's going to save these settings. And then if I go to change, say like the paver length to something longer, you'll see an update here. I can go and say load, and it will change it back to 12. It will also change any other UI settings that I had before, which is great. I can also export and import those settings as a separate file. It's called a JSON file. And then I can, so if you have like options that you're saving for paving or planting, and you want to reload those later, you can do that. Definitely experiment with these things before you rely on them too much in a project. Make sure you understand how they're working for you. And then running a workflow can be paused. So we can turn that off while we're working and resume that processing. So like the planting one, we have a bunch of main tabs, which are nice to be able to open and close for visual clarity. We have a disclaimer, we have instructions that explains the different layers we're working on. We also have a pattern um, setting here, so we can change whether we're doing a radial pattern. So this radial pattern works based off of the center point. We can do all these different options. So we can do and that looks so nice with the orange glow underneath there, doesn't it? And then we have the grid option. We have a running bond option, and all of these parameters change according to those options, which is super nice. So you're not sort of like, which setting do I need to set for this? It's only showing the things that you need. So for hex grid, you don't have a paver width because you don't need it. Um, the joint spacing is always in inches. So we also have some tips here showing you whether things are in inches or feet. These also work with meters. We have tested those even less, but they should work with the meters the way they did in the other workflow. We have the ability to change the paver rotation. And yeah, so that's that. And again, you can change this value by clicking here, like double clicking on the name and changing that to say like a 6-inch uh, hex paper. So now it's a really, really fun image. And let's look at color and see how I'm getting these colors. So I have under colors, I have how many colors. So I can pull this down to 3 and it only shows us 3 colors. And then I can go and I can change those and it shows us a full Rhino color picking menu. Um, and then I can do I can do up to 10 and we've filled in those slots, but we've kind of done something funny there. So, but you can pick as many colors as you like. Let's go back to 5, which is ideal for this pattern. And then so we're using an image color rule. So this uses the image on the image layer here under color rules. And I've got this, Bengal tiger thing. I'm not sure what this is. Um, it just looks cool. And then a oops, ability to do random colors, which, hey, sometimes you're just going to do random. That's fine. But we're hoping to add the ability to adjust quantities soon, like density of, create mixes and things like that. But we were just doing a big push to get all of this UI up to date. And so anybody who's used these workflows in the past will be able to sort of go and see quite a familiar setup. Attractors are going to use different geometries that we've drawn on the attractors layer. Where are those? Where are those? I'm not seeing them in my select objects. Oh, okay. I was looking for it in the white area. It's actually basing it off of the dark area. So if I take any of these points or curves, I can change those around, and that's the attractor, um, you know, color rule. And then there's the last one is a gradient, which goes based off of some sort of line or curve. So this is following this curve. So if I stretch this, you can see that this curvature should. Oh, I'm doing the wrong one. That's a different curve. So I'm going to do that. And you can see that because it's curving, it actually has a convergence point where the gradient is actually following along that curve. And wherever the start of the curve is where the color is gonna, the gradient's gonna end. So you could just move it around as much as you would like. And then we have the ability to do documentation. So we can turn on our rationalization, and what it does is it creates a grid, and I can change which shape that grid is, similar to my other paving options. So I could do, maybe somebody says, hey, we're going to do these cool hex grid cells, and that's actually part of the design. And maybe these cells are bigger or something, and we're going to have like these discrete mixes within each cell. And then you can adjust the size of that cell. You can change the rotation of that layout of that, layout grid, and then also change the percentage, whether these annotations are appearing or not, and whether they have what the denominator is. So right now it's 5%. So, we have increments of 5%. You could do 10 or 2 or whatever makes sense, or 1. So we also have a nice tab here that gives us totals of each color. So, each color and what its percentage is in the mix. And then the paver cuts, how many uncut pavers versus cut pavers we have, which is new, I believe. And then there's the output, which lets us pick whether we're showing and baking meshes or curves or hatches. So if you're exporting, curves, and then you want hatches, you could bake each of those. And then you just click this bake pavers button to bake those pavers. Um, what else? That's paving, I think. So let's open up Topo, and we can put this here. And yeah, good stuff. So we have the ability to collapse all of these things. We have a gorgeous looking UI here, a gorgeous looking example file. You can collapse this a little bit more. That's the neat thing. So we can see that we have our disclaimer, our workflow instructions, our site info. Oh, by the way, with the disclaimer, we're just saying this is going to require LandKit 2.1.1, which we're releasing very soon when we release the workflows. And then also that if you use these workflows and the code within that, you credit us, Um, you can change the site size here under site info, which will become a standard location for changing things about our site in general. Um, and then we have the ability to do existing features and mods like we do in the other workflows. But, you know, all of that should be pretty much the same. The other thing we're adding is geoset control. So for the existing geometries that are controlling the existing topography, we're able to turn on auto updating. And if we turn that off and we turn it off in the proposed as well, you'll see that a button appears. Well, actually, even if one of these is off, this button will appear, refresh geosets. So similar to before where you can do a bunch of work, say with the break lines, and then refresh that when you're ready, that will do it this way. But we've found that we things work fast enough most of the time for us that we can have live updates. And so it's nice to actually have the option to just turn those live updates on. And then you can obviously set up any features like paths, curbs, and walls, and those associate with layers over here. We have mods for existing, um, like resampling or smoothing, grading, sculpting, and then another round of those as well. So you can layer these things. And then we have all the same stuff for proposed. So paths, curbs, cuts, walls, stairs, and mods. So it's great because you can kind of zoom in and out of what you're working on, what's the context. So we can um, say, okay, I'm really worried about features right now with proposed, and I'm looking at these features, which is really nice. And then for output, we have this is kind of a nice updated menu. So we can we can turn on and off a number of options. So we have show contours, show flow lines, show sections, show elevations. So we can use, and the elevations are kind of they work best in plan. So we have all these options that we can turn on and off. And once you turn them on, you can see all of those settings here. So I can change our grid size of how dense these flow lines are to, like, let's say 2.5 instead. So you'll see a greater density of flow lines here. I can also double click on the name and change it to 5. We can change our step size. Make sure you have enough steps for it to actually flow. 1,000 is pretty good, but since we've made this accessible, I wanted to make a mention of that. And then you can always bake contours, bake flow lines, bake sections, or oops, bake spots. That should say bake spots. I got to fix that. Um, yeah, so nice optioning there for those different things. Probably keep contours on most of the time. And then we have different topographic visualizations. So right now we're showing areas, and we can bake those areas as well. This bake current topo will bake whatever the current mesh preview is. So we can do a basic mesh. We can do a site image. So this is projecting our site image from, there's like a site image layer in here that you can basically just align a JPEG that you've placed in Rhino. And then there's the ability to do an elevation viz, slope, which has ranges. You can see here. I think we want to add custom colorization to these in this workflow soon, since we can do it that much easier now. We have cut fill. We can customize the colors for cut fill, and we have like the cell size and the visualization depth. That just means that at 6 feet, if it's black, it means it's reached 6 feet, either going up or down, cut or fill. And then we can also just do standard coloring as well. So we got custom or standard, and it shows us the cut volume calculations as well. So that's the topo workflow. We have one more workflow, which is like the newest thing, and that's our soil cell workflow. We were calling it the tree workflow, but I think it was a little confusing because it didn't quite capture it. So we will launch that, and then let me pull the grasshopper into the grasshopper canvas, which is on a different screen. And I will pull our soil workflow over here to Rhino. And so now I've placed trees that have, well, actually, I've placed tree locations using the tree point layer or tree spot. And then there's tree, so I can pause this actually. Um, so we have tree locations using these spots. We have like this is where the open soil is. And then we have utilities running through all these things that are underground that you're going to have to think about. What the root ball size is for your trees in general. We're hoping to make this so that you can do multiple sizes, but currently it's just the one size. And um, I think our run, this is kind of, there's some things we need to fix on this. These are all kind of in beta. And I can turn this back on. The neat thing is that we can change the tree parameters, so we can change the radius. And this is live, which is kind of neat. Forget how. We're gonna make that more common on certain things that are fast. And then the root ball radius can change as well. But that doesn't change the sort of cell limits, which we should probably do. And then there's the root ball height, which can, you're not seeing it, but it's going down because when we set an elevation, the root ball can only, we don't want the root ball going up above the elevation. And then we have the target volume. So the target volume is relating to how much soil the plant probably wants. And in this case, we're saying the volume is very large. So let's change that to, I think a recommendation is 1,000, but we'll do 800 since these are urban trees and there's greater limitations. So these are starting to look much happier, right? They're in a range where they're not too far under 400. That's about half of what this tree needs. But this is actually maybe for some reason this got categorized in a different location. That's partly because there's a max radius. So this tree has a max radius of 70. I think if I make this larger, no, it should actually it should uh, merge these two. Uh, there's something going on there. I'm not totally sure, but it's calculating the tree volume that these soil cells are going to buy us, right? Like there's the amount of space right where the tree pit is, and then there's the root zone that we're kind of getting. And there, as you can see, these cells are working around the utilities, which is great. So if I were to take a utility and remove it, it would create enough space for that tree. So just delete those pipes. No, we don't recommend that. So then, but you can coordinate. This will help you to coordinate a little bit better with what's there. And then we have cell parameters, so we can change. We've got single unit, meaning if you're familiar, this is so we can customize this. But a good example is a Silva cell by Deep Root, and this is you know, this is what it looks like. We also can change the preview settings of this to be more detailed. So you can kind of see this soil cell with what you'd typically be familiar with, which also looks fantastic. We can also do a stackable cell. So that's a merino cell. You can see the merino cells have these little pockets. And so these are four cells stacked up together. And you can see that whenever there's a sort of a channel running through here that there's only room for one layer of the merino cell. But that could buy us enough space for maybe the roots to run through there and find more room to grow. Um, We can also do a custom version of this, so we can change the settings here according to the length and the width and the height of those cells and how many cells maximum we want. So these are very, it's kind of hard to see, but these are very tall cells. Um, and we could make them shorter. And there's a max limit now on the number of cells. So let's make it three instead of two, and you can see that they'll grow in height there as well. So more like the merino cells. Um, we can go to cell layout, and we can right now it's doing a dead flat layout. So it's just everything is dead flat, but you can see that our grade is sort of sloped. So if I change this to orient to top grade, it rotates everything, and now we have a much better coverage of that space that's available. We can also change the spacing between these cells. So right now it's I believe it's 0.1 feet, which is a bit odd of space, but we could go zero point 0.2 just to show you. We might change the fidelity on that slider. There you go, zero point 0.2. And then we can change the layout actually. So if our cells kind of work well for a grid or a running bond, that there's structural value in a running bond and a herringbone. I'm not sure if anyone's done that before with soil cells, but we're giving you the option. Now, there's the top of cell depth, so that's sort of like wherever the grade is, how far down are we going? I think that's the rule, if I'm not mistaken. So if I made this taller, top of the cell, it should move that down. Yeah, so it moves the top of the cell down. Um, and I don't know. We'll have to check. I'm not sure. That should be feet, but maybe it seems rather thin. And then there's the overall rotation of degrees. Now, the other cool thing is we can go in and do custom layouts. So each of these has a different rotation now. So I can select this zone, and then I can say customize the rotation. And I might say, hey, this is going to work better if this is rotated. Right now it's tweaked to 6, but I could do 96 and kind of rotate it so that it's running long ways this way. So you can adjust each zone according to its own unique rotation properties. We can do something similar with our utilities. So let's skip down here to utilities. So right now I'm in custom mode for my utilities. So I could take this pipe and say edit pipes. And then I can sort of look and see that this pipe is set to 2 feet deep and a 1.5 inch radius. And that depth is actually, I believe it's the center line, if I'm not mistaken. And then what I can do is say, okay, I'm going to bring that down to 3 feet because I've gotten a correction from my civil engineer or whoever from the city. And then I'm bringing that down. So now you can see that, and I can go and change this to 1. I can change the pipe radius, et cetera, et cetera. Um, for this workflow, I don't recommend sort of adding, removing parameters, but this custom tool allows you to do that for any kind of parameter editing that you might be doing in Grasshopper. Now, so I've shown you how to do pipes. You can do channels in a similar way. Channels just and you have to make sure you're selecting one of those to edit it and to see if it has existing properties. So in this case, we have a height of 3, a top depth of 1, and maybe somebody's got this all wrong and it's actually 4 feet wide, and that the top depth is actually, half a foot because we forgot about the sidewalk or something weird like that. So you can quickly adjust. Well, that's not adjusting. Should adjust. Let's just make it 0 just to see. I'm not sure why that's not changing. We'll have to double check on that. Um, and then the other thing is our output. So we have our preview, which I showed before. Right now we're in the soil volume preview that shows us the color according to the volume, how we're meeting the needs of the tree. And then we have the ability to do just solid color just so that there's less distraction, an X-ray view that lets us see into the in through and see those root balls and stuff, and then line work, which is just which is not working and we'll have to fix. And we have detailed versus fast mode. We have the ability to adjust the color for our Rexray or line work. Fast mode is only working on the line work for some reason. Well, just if you are using it and wanting to use that in this version, you can just do that. And then there's the section cuts, which is similar to, say, like our topo, but in this case, we include the cells and the trees, and we can adjust there's nothing to allow us to adjust the spacing between these, but we'll look at that. Shouldn't be too bad to sort this out if you're yeah. And then and we can just adjust those sections, and it shows you, well, it should show you the number here, but we'll add that. So it's 1, 2, and 3. You can kind of see those numbers here. They're very tiny. And then we can change the contours. We can turn contours on, and then we can adjust the spacing of those as well. So just say, oh, I want to do micrograding here and just see what's happening. Which very often when you're thinking about soil cells, you're also thinking about micrograding, so that helps. And then there's preview module count. So this is giving us a module count here. If I were to change the type of cell, it would give me. So if I go to, I kind of skipped over this part. If I go to single unit cells, single unit cells, in the case of the Silva cell, these are the standard sizes, and it shows these are the ones you would be using. So, 3 half-inch or half-foot cells, 15 1 foot, etc. And then if I am doing a custom version, it allows me to change these settings, the height and the width, and then I can have different types. So I can do up to 10 different cell types in this case. So right now I just have a basic default values here for those. And if we zoom down to the bottom here, just last few things, we can change when we're looking at these cells. We have these preview values here of the module size, so I can turn that on and off. So this is whether it's a custom cell, or I think we need to get it to show the type there that's missing. And then the preview soil depth, right? That's the SD soil depth, and then the soil volume, which doesn't seem to be working, but that will show the volume for each cell. So yeah, those are our 4 shiny new workflows, and you should check them out and test them out and maybe see if they could even work on one of your projects. We don't recommend diving into new workflows on a deadline. That would be a little risky. We think that let's say these are not production ready unless you've tested them to the degree that you feel comfortable with them being production ready. In most cases, I think a lot of the functionality is tried and true, but sometimes these things get messed up when we're translating from one platform to another. In this case, the DKUI platform, but so UI plugin replaced the human UI plugin, which allowed us to do a lot of really great things here. Cool. Well, I'll be sharing links, and good luck.